Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about, especially here in Pennsylvania, where I am located. I got to tell you, the Republicans here in this state never cease to amaze, and the lengths that they will go, no barriers. They are willing to do whatever it is, like a whiny child in a cereal aisle demanding its Fruit Loops. This is the Republican Party of today. There's no principle here. There's no ideology. There's no core value. There's none of that stuff. This is temper tantrum zone. This is kissing the orange ring, surrounded by the two giant cheeks. This is the new Republican Party. This is the party of, seriously, I don't get what these guys are thinking. And I'm going to start off with a quote that grabbed me today. Senate President pro tempore Jake Corman, he told the Philadelphia Inquirer, top Republican, told the Philly Inquirer that investigating the election, that pursuing the things that I'm going to tell you about here in a second, the most important thing in front of the Republicans this legislative session, going back and hashing out old grievances and relitigating failed lawsuits and attempting to revive busted myths of the past, that the most important thing in front of the legislature right now. Don't worry about people being evicted from their homes. Don't worry about the virus. Don't worry about people getting jobs. Don't worry about small businesses trying to stay afloat. Don't worry about any of that. Kids getting an education, roads and bridges. The thousands of other things, not important. Most important thing right now. There are 17 subpoenas that they have approved through a Senate subcommittee. These 17 subpoenas are going to be for all personal information on every single voter in this state. Understand what they're saying. The Republicans want all of the information, all of the voter information, all of it. They want all of it. They want to centralize all of the information into their slimy little hands. Now remember the argument for having 67 different counties and 67 different election officers and 67 different sets of rules to make sure that our elections aren't hacked or fiddled with, is that our diversity is our strength. What the Republicans are pushing forth right now is to grab all of that information for themselves. All of it. Now, here's the thing that I'm coming back to. They want a cyber ninja kind of thing that we saw in Arizona, to where we hand over the machines to a private industry. Who knows what they did with them. And in fact, Arizona is going to pay the cost because they have to get rid of those machines and get new ones because we have no idea what they did to them. But this is what the Republicans in this state want. They want to relitigate all of the things that have already been thrown out of courts across this country, this state. There have been multiple lawsuits. I don't know that there's anything that has been as litigated as the 2020 election, and yet they want more. And at every step of the way, every one of their failed arguments has been thrown out. You had the county audits, you had the state audits. There were no issues found. They couldn't find anything. No voter fraud. They couldn't find it. And trust me, they were looking. This is one of those moments where you go, what are they really trying to do? Because, I don't know if you saw the video recently. Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, candidly, when he thought he was speaking to a friendly audience, said, yeah, we know Trump lost. We know there was no rigging going on. We knew. This is all for show. And understand, most of the Republicans, someone like Corman, because I think he's a smart guy, knows this is all just a sham. This is political theater. This is to keep the base all bunched up in the panties, all lathered up. Now, there are a handful of crazy ones. There are, and we know who they are, that are true believers. They've sold the soul to the Trump demon. But the rest of the party, they're scared to death. And it's interesting to me that the people of power, the people in power, are afraid. They're afraid of the former guy. They're afraid of the rabid base that has taken over the Republican Party. They're afraid of the Q kooks who have made threats and done all kinds of crazy stuff, who show up to school board meetings and the lunacy that comes out of that. But when I see our statesmen, the people who are supposed to be our representatives, the people who we entrust our democratic process with, the people that we've put in charge of representing us in this incredible experiment of self-governance, when I see them cower to this kind of blatant attempt, to intimidate voters, to gather information to hand over to private interests for whatever means. And look, if they get it, this will be a major undertaking that taxpayers are going to pay for. And what will they do with the information? We may never know, because these people don't work for us. But as I was reading through this, and the governor's right. I think Governor Wolf is absolutely right. The information that they are requesting is just another step to undermine our democracy. This is all about undermining the sanctity of the ballot box, undermining trust in our ballot initiative, in our ballots, and really to catapult the propaganda of the last guy. Revive those conspiracy theories. This is a direct and continual assault on our electoral process, because they know they're not going to win elections in the future. They've got to do what they can do to restrict people from voting, and ultimately, they want the power to overturn elections. This is what they're working towards. They're working towards having the ability to go, you know what, we really don't agree with the will of the people. We know better. And all we have to do is claim that there were some irregularities. Oh, we found something, even if they created it. And they can install whoever they wanted. Now, look, I still know people who think Trump's going to be reinstalled. As kooky as that sounds, I still do. But I guess that's no more kooky than our state Senate going, we're going to subpoena the records of every single citizen in this state. Let that sink in. The party of small, less intrusive government, the party of local control, they're the ones who are consolidating your information, taking your information. It's scary stuff. But here's the thing, and I look at our wimps in the state Senate who are just going along, and I believe there are a lot of them who know this is all just a bunch of nonsense, but they're going to go along because we don't want to face an angry electorate. And I understand why average, everyday working people feel fear. And I guess there's a part of me that goes, if someone in a power position is as skittish and as fearful of consequences, I shouldn't be surprised that average, everyday working people are as well. And I had this really interesting conversation with a woman today who basically hates her job. The hours are way too long. The wages haven't kept up. She's struggling to make her payments. Her health insurance is terrible. There's no retirement security there if she gets to stay there long enough to get it. And she's treated horribly. Yet fearful, literally fear in her eyes, when I suggested that maybe she considered joining with her coworkers and forming a union. And it was that fear that wasn't just her. I had the opportunity to talk to a bunch of people who, they all say the same thing. They're being worked to death. They don't feel like the essential workers that they were called or the frontline heroes. They feel like they're being abused. But once you start saying you can stand up, you can speak out, you have rights, they start to back off. Especially when the boss, when the owners, when the hierarchy looks down upon them. And it was interesting watching people's reactions. I'm someone who likes to see how people react in situations. And, interestingly enough, there are people who are scared to death to talk about how they can make their lives better in the private sector. Now, these are all people who, interestingly enough, when you wanted to talk about politics and how bad government is, they were emboldened to say how horrible that is and take it out on someone they didn't like. But in something that could actually make their lives better, it was quite remarkable to me. And I'm not surprised. Look, this isn't new, but it's another one of those things that, when you're confronted with it again, when people are telling you how difficult their lives are, when they're telling you how difficult, coming to work and being treated poorly and in difficult conditions, when they tell those stories, I can only go, well, how can we help? How can you make that better? How can you do more? How can you pull yourself up? And me, as someone who believes in unions and the power of organizing, the power of collective bargaining, that's the club out of the bag. This is what you should be working towards. Once you start saying, hey, we're going to band together to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, we're going to be moving forward in a concerted way, you have protections, you have rights. And the boss doesn't want you to know that. They want you to look over your shoulder. And it was amazing watching people, as soon as you said, hey, this is how you can make your life better, the way the head snapped around looking for the boss. And he was there looking over their shoulder, intimidating them. So when I think about looking at the people who we think should have the power to stand up and defend rights and to do the right thing, our legislators, I guess I'm not as hard on average everyday working people who are just trying to make a living. And I had someone say, well, if they don't like it, one of the management people said if they don't like it here, they can go somewhere else. And the reality is they can't, because the conditions are the same the place next door. The conditions are the same, if not worse, down the road. The conditions are the same, if not worse, around the block, across town, across the country. It's all the same. Long hours, low wages, expensive health care, retirement security that doesn't exist, and voiceless and powerless. And, I had a conversation today with someone who, I trust and I respect. And I said, to me, this is why people are so angry at their government, because it's the outlet that they're allowed to have. It's the outlet that corporate America has gone, yeah, go beat them up. It's the outlet that's acceptable in those places. Because ultimately, as long as we're divided, as long as we're pitted against each other, as long as we're at each other's throats over one nonsensical thing or another, we're not looking back at them. Because when the boss came through the exit line, he was driving a $100,000 vehicle. The poor working stiffs that I saw, they were driving 20-year-old Hondas and Toyotas and Fords and Chevys. They were driving cars that were barely getting through an inspection, and they were coming out exhausted. Because a lot of the conversations started off, man, you look whipped. Yeah, long day. You go every day. That's how it is every day. Well, you can do something about that. Oh, no, I can't do that. It's quite remarkable to me. And the more I look at this stuff and the more I talk about how, in my lifetime, how union membership has made my life better and other workers better, I think it's important to share those stories and the wins. And look, this year, a good year for labor wins. In fact, Nabisco has been on strike in several locations across the country. Same thing, long hours, wages that haven't kept up, wanting to claw back overtime protections and things that have been long-standing, things that workers need. I understand there is a tentative agreement. We don't know the details as of yet, but the union representing the Nabisco workers, the BCTGM, they've reported that there is something, and it's going to be voted on in the coming days. Now, this doesn't mean that the strike's over. This doesn't mean that it's going to end tomorrow. This means there's going to be a vote on the contract. Democracy in the workplace. People having the right to go, okay, this is what's being offered. We can take it, or we continue to be on strike. This, to me, is the perfect scenario. And every person that I talked to today was like, this company's making incredible amounts of money. And at every opportunity, they're nickel and diming us. And we're not the heroes and the essential workers that everyone thinks they were. They don't treat us like that because we're disposable. We're at will. And these are things that I think are really important to talk about in this moment. Because in this moment, the employer class is being nice because they have to. There's, quote unquote, a shortage. This is the moment where you negotiate your gains, but you get it in writing so that you don't lose it. And this isn't rocket science. You have to be a genius to figure this out. The second corporate America figures that they can take things back, they're going to. So if you're not happy, you can change things. If things aren't what you want, you can change things. You just have to be willing to join together, and that's the important part. You have to join together and stand together. It's not that difficult. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. What are your horror stories? Are you working long hours, low pay, all that still the reality of the workforce? I'd love to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1970. That was the day 350,000 GM workers kicked off a 67-day strike. It was the largest auto strike since the end of World War II. According to historian Jefferson Cowie, it was likely the costliest. In his book, Stayin' Alive, Cowie notes that the strike cost GM $1 billion in profits and nearly bankrupted the union. But he adds it, quote, lacked the proletarian drama that fired journalists' hearts. For Cowie, it was an example of labor management cooperation, a civilized affair. But historian Jeremy Breacher points out that the Wall Street Journal drew different conclusions about the strike at the time. In a series of articles, the paper noted that labor management cooperation during the strike served ironically to get workers back to work. A long and costly strike served a number of functions. It wore down strikers' expectations. After 8 or 10 weeks, workers would be amiable to terms they initially rejected. It also provided an escape valve for built-up frustration over working conditions. And a long strike served to coalesce internal union factions around a common enemy, strengthening the union's leadership in the process. For management, a long and costly strike lent hope that workers would be reluctant to strike in the future. But Breacher notes these ideas about workers' motives nearly backfired. Strikers simply wouldn't budge on their demands. They made gains in wages, pensions, and cost of living allowances. And they were finally able to retire after 30 years. But critics argued the agreement fell short of initial demands, and workers lacked more say in the workplace. This would be a key issue in the many strikes and wildcats in the years to come. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I'm looking at the results of the recall in California yesterday, and wow, polling not even close. Originally, they said this was kind of a toss-up. Newsom could get recalled. We could end up with a crazy guy as the governor of California. Somebody who believed that we'd have to give white landowners in the South reparations, which is weird. But yeah, there he was. He was going to be the next governor. And there was all this talk. It was possible. And then the polling came back. Well, maybe not so much. It'll be close, but 64%. That said, no, we don't want this governor recalled. In fact, it was even higher than the vote that he got in 2018, which was somewhere around, I guess, like 62%. So he actually performed better in the recall. So, hey, all of the moneyed interests who are pushing for this, congratulations. You made him evidently even more popular. So good job. And here to share some thoughts on the results of yesterday's recall in California, I've asked Eve Levenson to come talk with us. She's the National Youth Advisor for Grassroots Democrats HQ. Their website, grassrootsdems.org. Eve, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much for having me on. We're really excited as a Californian, as somebody who works at the Grassroots Dem HQ. The results of yesterday are really exciting and show really how much the grassroots has worked, but also hopefully a good sign for the public support of Democratic policies. So thanks so much for having me on to discuss it.
No, I think it's important. And look, I was happy to see the results that came back. I wanted a big, decisive victory, especially in these things where you don't get a lot of turnout. I thought it was important because I knew the Republican base would be all lathered up in the panties to run out there and throw the guy out. So it shows me that the Democrats were pretty pumped up as well to get out and vote for this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that what we saw in the polls is that sort of like 2 weeks ago, there wasn't necessarily that same excitement and support, but then we really saw a full court press from everybody from the grassroots and the California American Party who had been working this long time. The Grassroots Dem HQ had been doing phone banks and had really shifted over most of our operation away from the general focus to focus on this. We really saw in the last 2 weeks a sort of national effort and push that I think really made a big difference in making sure that people knew that they needed to go out and vote, because what we know is that there, of course, are more registered Democrats in the state of California than Republicans. But I think the early polls really show why that voter engagement is so important. If the voter doesn't realize an election is happening or why the election is so important, that's when we're at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is such a decisive victory. That not even the Trumpkins can go, oh my God, they cheated. Oh my God, they stuffed the ballot box. Dead people were voting. And I expected to wake up to that this morning.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the reality is when you win by, I think right now it's still a 2-1 margin, that you really can't have an instance of the claims of voter suppression really can't be there. I think that's why it's so important, not just that we won, but that we won by a landslide, because this wasn't just about California. This was also about showing support for science, showing support for vaccines, and also making sure that we really can move beyond this and not have to waste any more time or money with any sort of dispute over whether or not the election was valid. And I think that that's the reality, that this recall should have never happened. Newsom showed that he won by more than he won in the original race. And now it's time to push our grassroots efforts back to 2021 and 2022. The reality is that the Grassroots Dem HQ made 490,000 phone calls, sent 223,000 postcards, knocked on 5,100 doors, and engaged 3,500 volunteers. And that's incredible. But also now we need to get back to focusing on keeping Virginia blue in 2021 and keeping the Senate and the House in 2022.
Right. No, absolutely. Without question. How much do you give Greg Abbott credit for the win there in California? Because I got to be honest, the Texas rapist Bill of Rights seems to have generated a lot of activity here. How much played into California? And I don't actually know how it played out there. That's why I'm asking. How much of that played into what you saw there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we would have won in California whether or not that had been the case. I do think, though, the reality is that reproductive justice is a really important issue for so many people, so many young people like myself. I'm 21. I think that this was sort of the first instance in which we saw how much Roe v. Wade is at stake, which hasn't really been a reality in our lifetime before. It was an issue. It was a talking point of the 2016 election. It's something that made me want to get out and do everything I could to support Hillary Clinton. However, I think that there's a difference between when you actually see that reality and when you see the court ruling that way. So I think everything played a role in it. But I think what we saw from the exit polls is that COVID was the primary factor that drove voters to the polls on all sides of the aisle. And obviously it drove more of our peoples to the polls because there were more Democrats to go and vote and support to keep Newsom.
Right. So would you agree that maybe DeSantis in Florida was more responsible than Abbott then? Because
I mean, I don't want to ever credit a Republican with our successes. I think that we win because we have the better policies and because we have the better grassroots game as well.
No, that's where I was going to go with this, because the policy of, well, we're not going to do anything and we'll just let people die, that doesn't seem to be really popular.
No, it isn't. And I think that's what we saw. And what we saw, especially when I was doing these vote banks, was that our volunteers weren't just from California. There were people from all over the country because everybody was so concerned about what was going to happen, which as a Californian was kind of something nice to see, as somebody who has spent so much time working and volunteering for campaigns in other states, to sort of see that grassroots energy come back, because we knew that this was a referendum on science, on Democrats' response to COVID, and we showed up both in volunteers nationwide and voters in California.
Yeah, it was a big deal. Now, going forward, I mean, I'm hoping that this is a springboard to bigger and better things, because going to need it in 2022, especially if we don't get anything done on the infrastructure front, which the fear is the circular firing squad is being convened. But we need the youth vote. We need the young people to come out and vote in numbers like they haven't in years past. And I know your organization is working to do that. So how is that going? How are you working in that world?
Definitely. I will just say, I think on the infrastructure point, I still have hope. I think that, Speaker Pelosi and the other leaders really have shown that they are committed to having this dual approach. So I think we will get the infrastructure package, and that'll be something that we can tout to voters in 2022. But the reality is, no matter how much or how little is accomplished, we still need to keep our majorities. And so specifically, what we're working on right now in 2021 is a program to contact 90,000 young voters ages 18 to 29 in the state of Virginia to ensure we keep the House of Delegates and that we elect Hala Ayala to be the first ever woman of color elected statewide in Virginia, and also ensure that we keep the Virginia Governor's House blue by re-electing Terry. And so that's really what we're working on, working with groups in Virginia, working with another youth group called Blue Future to be able to contact those 90,000 young voters, make sure they're registered to vote, make sure they turn out to vote, and make sure they vote for Democrats in those key districts. And then we hope that once that works out, that we can replicate the program in the Virginia congressional districts in 2022, in addition to expanding to Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. So that's a focus. And I think that method sort of having youth-led programs, targeting voters in specific districts, and also reaching out to them both with the issues they care about, is really how we're going to make a difference in reaching voters where they are, which young voters, which tends to be on college campuses, obviously. So traditional on-campus organizing is important, but also on social media and also through text. We need to invest in texting young voters, because value is a lot of young voters are less likely to answer their phones. We should still call them, but when a campaign or a group is investing in texting, I think that targeting that towards young voters is definitely one of the best ways to invest that resource.
Yeah, you got to reach people where they are. I'm an old school organizer. I still believe face-to-face, shaking someone's hand, having a conversation is the best way. But when talking to my kids, I actually text them.
Yeah.
We're in the same house. We're basically sitting next to each other, and I still text them because it's the world that we now live in, right?
Yeah. Well, and also a lot of young voters like me, if you went and you tried to canvass me at my house, I probably wouldn't be there because I'm in school right now on the other side of the country. But if you text me, my phone number is going to stay the same as whatever is in the voter file. So I think that's really important when you think about how to engage young people where they are.
So what does your generation think of, like here in Pennsylvania, our state Senate just decided that they want to subpoena all of the voting records for every voter in the state. They want to compile all this information on everyone because there was all of these nefarious activities that they kept throwing out and the courts kept throwing out. What's the thought on some of these outlandish claims of all this voter fraud and voter suppression that are being made?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that what we know is that those claims of voter fraud are so far and few between that they really rarely happen. And what the real issue is voter suppression. I think that that's why it's so important that we get legislation passed. I'm a big proponent of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the For the People Act. And I think that if what can get through the Senate, is the new compromise that came out today with Joe Manchin's support, then that's definitely better than nothing. Obviously, if there's a way to get the more sweeping reforms through, that's what I prefer. But time is really running out to be able to get that legislation passed, to have it be able to be in effect by the 2022 election. But I think the larger issue than so-called cases of voter fraud is really the voter suppression that we see that's targeting marginalized group, communities of color, young people, disabled voters, the voters that we know are really the ones who are most affected by the policies that are being considered and that the elections make a difference for.
Yeah, and going after poor people. I mean, it's the way that Republicans have identified and how they can. The only way that they can win is to make sure. And this isn't new. I mean, this goes back to 1980 and Paul Weyrich, saying, we don't want everybody voting. We want our people to vote, but not them. And they've moved policy heaven and earth to get to the point where they've been able to do that. Starting in 2000 when you had Al Gore who won the election. Basically having that taken from him because Florida decided voting while black is a crime. But in going forward with the legislation, because here's the problem, and we got a big problem. It's never getting 60 votes. It's never going to get past cloture. And I don't see an appetite with the Democrats to undo the filibuster. How do you see this getting through?
I mean, I think that we have seen some inclination of that. I think that there's a possibility of there being a carve out in the filibuster. And I know that we've seen some reports of that happening. So I think that it's about, we need to keep on pushing for that on the legislative side, but we also need to plan. And it's now the organizing for 2022 has already started, and we need to just sort of do both at the same time. And obviously not everybody can do 100% of both at the same time, but it's important to be involved in at least one, I think. So, I mean, I think the reality is, I think it's unlikely we get 60 votes. That being said, I think a carve out might be more likely than a total abolition of the filibuster.
So where do you find yourself on the filibuster? Do you think we should abolish it? Think we should be carving it up and putting holes in it like Swiss cheese? How do you see that?
I personally think that I would not be too upset if the filibuster went away. That being said, I understand that it's not necessarily the most realistic thing at this time. I think that what's most important is getting the legislation passed that's going to support the people of America. And so I think that whether that's a carve out, whether that's abolishing it, whichever way we can get help to the American people as quickly as possible is the most important. And sometimes that's going to be pushing certain bills through reconciliation.
Yeah, I've been saying for a while we should be pushing more reconciliation bills. Congress has the ability to pass 13 budget bills a year. In fact, they're supposed to. They used to. They used to have 13 individual budget bills. And they used to pass them. They haven't done it in a number of years. But for me, I think that's 13 bites at the apple to take this big plan and move a lot of little ones that are a lot easier to message and a lot easier to digest to get people behind. Because look, this $3.5 trillion spending plan is very popular when you start telling people what's in it. When you stop demonizing it and saying, oh, it's just wasteful spending, it's actually investments in communities and people getting educations and your generation not being saddled with a lifetime of student loan debt.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And I think that that's what hopefully we will see come out of the budget discussions that are happening. But again, I think that while we're pushing for these legislative fights, it's also really important that we are keeping our eye on the elections, because the reality is there are no off years, and that's both because there are things like recalls that come up and off-year elections in Virginia, but also because working for elections is a year-round activity. You need to have the sustained organizing and the sustained voter contact. You can't just come in the 3 months before.
Yeah, see, here's the thing, and this is where there's part of me that goes, I wish we could return to the days where elections were just for 3 months. I think a lot of people are burnt out at the constant, the 24/7, 365 election cycle, that the day that you get elected, you're running for re-election. In fact, I've got friends in Congress who tell me, the day that they get elected, they're raising money for the next election, which takes so much time away from them doing the kind of work that they need to do. And there's my set, I wish we could have 3 months, duke it out for 3 months, beat each other bloody if we have to, and then election day, let's get some stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, I think though there's also a part of organizing that's not necessarily just solely electoral organizing, but it's about building power within communities. It's about ensuring that folks are trained up, that you're working on whatever that community needs. And so I think that what we saw is a lot of Democratic campaigns at the beginning of the coronavirus were not really focused necessarily getting out the vote, but were focused on ensuring that people had what they needed, supporting mutual aid. And so I think that when I say like year-round organizing, that's also what that includes. But then I think that when there are Republican distraction tactics that come up, like the recall campaign, that really puts a rent in that sort of more sustained organizing and the investing in those communities that are both important electorally, but also important because all communities and all people are important.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I look at this recall as this was busy work. This was the rich people of this country going, let's throw a little wrench into the system. Let's make people spend resources and spin their wheels to try and defend Newsom, knowing that I got to believe they knew they weren't going to win. But this was about stopping progress. This was about giving Biden a black eye potentially. This was about gumming up the system just enough to, well, cause a little chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that that's exactly right. This recall election, we knew that Democrats controlled California. We still know that Democrats and Californians want Newsom. But the reality is it was a distraction tactic. And so now what we have to do is we need to get back to focusing on the legislative fights and looking to the Virginia election is less than 2 months away. That's very soon, right around the corner. And we need everybody who put all their attention in California, who phone banked, who donated, who wrote letters, who knocked doors. We need that same effort now to be put towards the Virginia legislative cycle.
And how can people help? I know going to your website, Grassroots Dems.
Yeah, I would say go to our website, grassrootsdems.org. The HQ is going to be, in addition to the youth program I discussed, also be working directly with the coordinated campaign and different House of Delegates campaigns. So there will be opportunities for phone banking and texting and postcarding from around the country, in addition to opportunities to support canvassing for folks who are in the area as well. So the website, definitely the best place to go. And I also will be definitely putting out a lot about that on my social media. As a college student in DC, I think it's really important that we go and put our boots on the ground and knock on those doors in Virginia as well.
We got a lot of work to do. And what kind of things from Pennsylvania, from Michigan, from Alaska, what could people do to help real quick?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, folks who have the ability to support monetarily, that's always helpful. But also there's texting voters, writing postcards and notes to voters, and calling voters. The best form of voter contact that folks can help with from out of state is really that calling voters. And we're going to see a lot more volunteer opportunities coming from the Grassroots HQ for Virginia in the coming days.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Grassrootsdems.org, the website. We'll get links out on social media. Eva, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Good stuff. Again, the website, grassrootsdems.org. We'll get some links out on how you can help keep Virginia. And maybe we can push Virginia to undo their horrible no rights at work agenda and get rid of right to work laws there. Just my thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1931. That was the day that came to be known as the Invergordon Mutiny in Scotland. The global depression had begun to sweep across Europe. In response to the economic crisis, the British government began cutting the pay of public sector workers. This included those in the armed forces. This came at a time when more workers were joining the armed forces because of the rising unemployment that ravaged the private sector. For those in the Navy, the proposed pay cuts were 10% for officers and as high as 25% for those under the rank of petty officer. As news of the pay cuts spread, sailors at Invergordon held meetings to discuss their response. Invergordon, Scotland had become an important harbor for the British fleet during World War I. The sailors decided to strike. On the day of the strike, several ships were scheduled to participate in exercises. But the sailors on 4 vessels refused to take their ships out of the harbor. Many men did not report for duty. Naval leaders gave in quickly, reducing the severity of the pay cuts. But many of the leaders of the strike faced reprisals. Some were jailed. Others were drummed out of the Navy. Spies for the Admiralty went below decks to monitor the sailors and report those who might cause future trouble. Government leaders tried to keep the news of the strike out of the news. But workers' rallies against public sector cuts spread to cities like Glasgow and London. The strike also caused a panic at the London Stock Exchange. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, sad day. This is one of those days it's just kind of infuriating that everybody agrees we should be doing things to lower the price of prescription drugs. Everybody. I don't know anyone who goes, no, Rick, we don't, no. We're Americans, damn it. We pay full price. We pay retail. In fact, we pay above retail. I don't know anybody who... That's not true. I do know some lobbyists who work for Big Pharma who think, oh, no, we want full price because that's how they get their salaries paid. But the average everyday working people that I know, they're tired of being mugged over the cost of prescription drugs. So to have 3 Democrats come out and who have taken almost $2 million in campaign cash from Big Pharma come out and say, no, we're not going to help. That's infuriating to me. And here to share some thoughts on just how bad this is, I've asked Laura Packard to come talk with us. Laura's a stage 4 cancer survivor and the executive director of Healthcare Voter, their website, healthcarevoter.com. Laura, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So am I getting this right? We've got these 3 Democrats, Kurt Schrader, Scott Peters of California, Kathleen Rice of New York, said, no, we're happy where the drug prices are at this moment. We don't need anything to help lower them. Am I getting this right?
Yes. In committee today, in the House Energy and Commerce Committee, those 3 voted against a provision to lower the cost of prescription drugs. And because of that vote, it was tied, and it is not a part of the Build Back Better bill. However, this is not the end of it. Ways and Means is working on a provision, and the Senate side is working on a provision. So this is not done. This is just the first step, but it is not a good first step.
Yeah. No, this is one of those things where you look at all of the, and there aren't a lot of Democrats who are the ones who are getting the shotgun ready for the circular firing squad, but there are enough. You got a couple in the House, these 3. You've got a couple in the Senate that seem to just want to, gum up any progress. And for what I think are just ridiculous kind of reasons, for me, if they don't get anything done, they're all done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and these weak-kneed Pharma 3, they were more than happy to vote for the bill in 2019 when it didn't matter, when Mitch McConnell's Senate was a graveyard for progressive bills. But now that it actually matters, all of a sudden they have concerns, and maybe those concerns all of a sudden popped up because Big Pharma is dropping 7 figures on ad campaigns. But this is a popular issue across the board, regardless of political party. Americans think we spend too much on prescription drugs, and they're right. We pay more than any other country, and this is their chance to do something about it. And today they whiffed because they were listening to their Big Pharma donors instead of their own constituents.
So what's the argument? What's their concern? I mean, I listened to Joe Manchin talk about the $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill, and his concern is now he cares about the debt. Now he cares about deficits. Now he's had this come to Jesus moment where debt and deficit now matter. Didn't hear much the last several years, but now when we're going to get some things that we need, now it seriously matters. But these 3, where do you see that?
Well, they say that they care about the poor pharmaceutical companies not having the money to develop new drugs, except for this is one of the most profitable industries in the country. And why is it that Americans have to pay so many times more for this innovation and nobody else in the world has to pay these prices? Now, the big pharmaceutical companies are marketing companies. They don't put their money into R&D anyway. It's the small companies that develop the drugs and then get bought up by the big companies. And then the big companies market the hell out of it. So it's not even that they need the money for research. It's they need more money to shower it on their executives and stock buybacks. It'd be one thing if they were actually doing the development, but they aren't. All of the innovation that doesn't come from research we already paid for through the NIH is coming from these smaller companies that just then get bought.
No, and I think that's something important to make sure people understand, because our government spends an awful lot of money on research through the NIH, as you point out, and through our universities. I mean, our universities are the incubator of a lot of breakthrough discoveries, as they should be. I mean, this is part of the reason why we want to have the world's best higher education system, and why I think we should be funding them at a much higher rate. And maybe, just maybe, if we had taken some of those patents that they created and let them hold on to them and profit from them, maybe we could fund education instead of more boats and whatever for the billionaires who run our big pharma companies.
Exactly. And if it's so important that we be putting money into R&D, then how about we cut the price of prescription drugs and beef up NIH funding so that we can all benefit from it, as opposed to only specific stockholders of a specific company. So their arguments don't hold water, but unfortunately their wallet does. So that's why these politicians are listening.
I have a friend who he's hell bent on reimportation of drugs. His answer to our problem is, just let me buy them from Canada or from the UK or from India. Let me buy the same drugs I can get from my pharmacy from freaking India because it's cheaper. And you go, what sense does that make? Why don't we just make the cost cheaper here so we can buy them from here? What about that?
And the whole idea of reimportation, that the reason why it's cheaper in every other country is every other country is using their bargaining power to push down the cost of the drugs. We're the only ones that have our hands tied behind our back, and we don't use the purchasing power of the American government to get cheaper prices. So trying to take another country's supply is just ridiculous. We're not practicing the willpower we need right here at home to get our own cheaper prices.
Yeah, it's incredible to me. I mean, and we can thank George W. Bush for this, and the Republicans who rammed through we're never going to pay anything but retail for prescription drugs with the Medicare Part D is what they rammed through, along with privatizing portions of Medicare, because hey, we believe in the free market. And so I'm in this spot where you believe in the free market, but we can't negotiate for prices, which is, I don't know, isn't that one of the main tenets of the free market, that you have the ability to negotiate or to abstain? Isn't that kind of like the central definition?
Exactly. And also, let's talk some more about this amazing research that's supposed to be producing these drugs. When you look at a drug like insulin, that they jack up the prices year after year after year, and it's the same drug that was discovered decades ago. Or look at what PharmaBro did in taking a drug that had been around a long time that people depended on, and then he jacked it 700% because he could. It's not that they're spending the money, or they're spending a small fraction of money on development compared to their big marketing budgets.
But what do you say to the argument, Laura, that if we don't allow them to pursue these obscene profits, that if we don't protect their patents, that if we don't do the status quo, that eventually they're just going to stop, and then we'll have nothing. We'll all be standing around, looking at each other, drug free. What's the argument against that?
So these private companies need guaranteed profits to exist, because that doesn't sound like any sort of free enterprise. Why do they need to guaranteed customer paying top dollar in order to make a profit? Run your business better.
Yeah, you see, that seems rational to me. And again, I go back to this, this economies of scale thing. The federal government is the largest purchaser of drugs in the world. And they've given up the only leverage that you really could possibly have in helping taxpayers, because eventually we pay for all of it, as do seniors overwhelmingly who consume these drugs. It seems to me that this would be a win for them to say, no, now we need to go. So while we're focused on these three Democrats, who I got to be honest, I got problems with right now, but there's still 200 Republicans who voted no too. There are still every Republican who said, no, we don't care about taxpayers. We don't care about seniors. We don't care about the price of drugs. They didn't come along either.
Mm-hmm. And just like Trump said he would do something about drug prices, he talked and talked and talked and never delivered. He talked and talked and talked about a great health insurance program and never delivered on that either. Republicans are all talk and no action unless their action is voting down good ideas.
Yeah, no, you got that exactly right. And since you brought up Trump's plan, because I actually had someone bring that up to me not too long ago that said, Donald Trump had a great plan and Democrats blocked it. I'm going, I don't remember him coming out with a plan. I do remember for a while saying he had a plan. It was secretly locked away on a whole bunch of pages. And it came in the same pack that you could buy the Ream at the Staples. A whole bunch of blank pages because there's no idea there. But do you remember anything that Trump came out with that would have given access to health care to people, would have expanded access, would have lowered prices for health care and drugs? Do you remember anything like that?
Well, the health care plan never came, but his drug plan, first of all, was he was going to issue drug rebate cards to seniors that had his name written all over it. So that was the drug card bribe. And then it turned out that wasn't exactly legal. So that didn't happen. And then he issued an executive order that said, we're going to pay cheaper prices. And it turned out that wasn't really exactly legal and well done either. So he was the kid that tried to do his homework 2 minutes before it was due, and unsurprisingly, it was full of errors.
Yeah, no. Now that that's starting to come back, I forgot all about the executive order, which was magically everyone's going to pay lower prices because I say so. Snap the fingers, done.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not so easy. The Biden administration just released their drug plan a few days ago, and it's easy to come up with plans. It's harder to execute them, and that's what we're seeing out of Congress.
So
I have faith. It's not over, but we have a ways to go.
No, I'm hopeful, but in looking at Biden's plan, what's in it? What do you think is possible? Do you think something gets done? After all, we still have to figure out how to either get to the 60 threshold or somehow tuck it into the budget reconciliation. What's in it? Where do you see the path forward?
Well, his plan includes the things that Congress is working on now. Also, some work on the executive side, some things that he can do via regulations. And something I'm very interested in his plans is looking at monopolies and putting a lot more scrutiny on healthcare monopolies that raise the costs for all of us. So I think having a robust FTC, having a robust executive branch that is actually paying attention and working for consumers means a lot of this shady stuff that companies have gotten away with before, they hopefully won't be able to get away with anymore.
Now, you're someone who, unfortunately, has consumed an awful lot of healthcare, as you went through cancer and through your life. You look at this, and what would it have meant to have, health security that you didn't have to constantly be worrying about the bills, worrying about potentially going bankrupt? Because I'm in this mindset that I think the average everyday working person just wants to make sure that if they get sick, they're going to get covered. I don't think most people care if it's a private employer plan or if it's a government plan. I think they just want to make sure that they have the security of knowing that if they get cancer like you did, or if their kid falls off the monkey bars and breaks an arm, that they don't have to worry about bankruptcy. I think most people are in that world.
Right. I mean, most people are not health insurance policy experts. They just want to have the security of knowing that if something happens, they're covered. And it's become an ordeal every year to go through all the plans and figure out what's the right situation and hope that it'll really cover you when you need it. And things have gotten better, certainly, through the Affordable Care Act and until now, but it's still not an easy process. And you shouldn't have to be a healthcare expert to just be able to have the coverage you need.
No, I mean, and that's the right example. I mean, I keep hearing people say, well, I shouldn't have to pay for things that I don't need. I'm going, well, you need everything. You need to make sure that if something happens, you're covered. And it's this kind of piecemealing that I'm concerned about. Well, I need this. I don't need that. I need to be covered. I need to know that when I get sick, I'm going to see a doctor. That doctor is going to be sane, and he's going to have credentials, and he's going to follow the right path and get me as well as possible. I think we want that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I believe that most Americans want everybody to have health care. And there's a lot of fighting about the details, but I believe our hearts are all in the right place. I just wish that more of our elected officials listen to their people instead of to their donors.
Yeah, good point. So getting back to this, you said that this fight isn't over. It's going through another committee that's potentially going to be in the bill. What are the chances of the bill getting passed overall? I mean, I'm looking at Joe Manchin. I'm looking at Sinema, which I guess the president today had a meeting with both of them. There doesn't seem to be a lot of urgency from the two of them to get something forth, even though we desperately need it. How do you see this playing out?
Well, there isn't a lot of room for error. We need every single vote in the Senate, and we can only spare a small handful of votes in the House. This is assuming, of course, that no Republican will vote for healthcare. And unfortunately, in the world we live in, it appears that no Republican will vote for healthcare. So anyways, assuming that there are no sane Republicans that are willing to vote in favor of their own constituents, then we don't have a lot of room to maneuver. But Nancy Pelosi is one of the best vote counters the House has ever had. So I have my faith in Nancy Pelosi and my faith in all of these legislators that at the end of the day, even if they are not putting their constituents first, they'll hopefully put their own butts first and make sure that they pass something so that Democrats have something to run on next year.
No, that's the line right there. You got to have something that you've actually gotten done, that you've actually produced to say, hey, this is how we've made your life better. We brought some bacon home, and this is why you vote for us again. Because my fear, and I said this from day one, my fear is one side says, no, we're not going to vote on anything but the hard infrastructure bill. One side says, well, if we're not getting the other side, you're not getting this. And at the end of the road, we're sitting here with nothing in either hand. And then, coming out to the voters in 2022 going, oops.
Yeah. And I mean, if that's what happens, it's understandable if the voters say to heck with this and vote people out. So even if these elected officials are hearing from, the money people, don't do this, don't raise taxes, don't hurt the big corporations or whatever. If they don't do anything, they aren't going to have a job to work from after that. So I hope that they're at least listening to the polling and seeing how important these healthcare reforms are to Americans.
Especially because they're very popular. Look, the numbers, the polling numbers are really high on this stuff. But Laura, I appreciate you taking some time for us, keeping us up to date on what's going on there in Congress and getting us motivated to get some stuff done. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And contact your representatives.
There you go. Our good friend, Laura Packard. Make sure you check out the work that she's doing, laurapackard.com. She's the executive director there of Healthcare Voter. Make sure you check out their website, healthcarevoter.com as well. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1845. 5,000 female workers at the Allegheny Cotton Mill went on strike for a 10-hour workday. The fast streams around Pittsburgh and Allegheny City were ideal to power cotton mills. The mills were overheated and filled with dangerous dust. Many of these women and child workers suffered from work-related lung diseases. The 7 factories of Allegheny City employed about 1,500 young women. These women earned between $2.50 and $6 a week. They worked from sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week. Children made $3 a week at most. In 1843, factory owners cut wages even further. In the 1940s, a woman who had worked in the mills noted, "The ear filled with the noise of thousands of spindles." Anger over the deplorable working conditions grew. In early 1845, the women and children had had enough. They walked off the job and demanded a 10-hour workday and a living wage. Men supported them by gathering to protect the women from police attacks. After holding out for a month, the women began to return to work to survive. Some of the remaining strikers decided to try and remove the returning workers from the mills. They armed themselves with axes, but could not dislodge the workers. Public opinion turned against the striking women. Then, in September, workers marched on one of the largest area mills. The women broke down the factory gates and forcibly evicted the scab workers. The strike lasted for 6 months, but slowly, out of desperation, more and more of the women workers went back to the mills. Although the women did not get their demands, the strike drew national attention. On Independence Day in 1848, the Pennsylvania legislature put into effect a 10-hour day law. But sadly, the law had numerous loopholes and had no real enforcement. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
The past year proves that a lot of conventional economic wisdom is neither true nor wise. For example, we don't have the money. The power elites tell us it would be nice to do the big-ticket reforms America needs, but the money just isn't there. Then a pandemic slammed into America, and suddenly trillions of dollars gushed out of Washington for everything from subsidizing meat packers to developing vaccines, revealing that the money is there. We can't increase the federal debt. Yet, Trump and the Republican Congress didn't hesitate to shove the national debt through the roof in 2017 to let a few corporations and billionaires pocket a $1 trillion tax giveaway. So, if those drunken spenders can use federal borrowing to make the likes of Amazon and Zuckerberg richer, we can borrow funds for such productive national needs as infrastructure investment and quality education for all. The rich are the makers who contribute the most to society. This silly myth quickly melted right in front of us as soon as Senor Coronavirus arrived, making plain that the most valuable people are nurses, grocery clerks, teachers, postal employees, and millions of other mostly low-wage people. So let's capitalize on the moment to demand policies that reward these grassroots makers instead of Wall Street's billionaire takers. Tax cuts drive economic growth for all. They always claim that freeing corporations from the burden of taxes will encourage CEOs to invest in worker productivity, and voila, wages will miraculously rise. This scam has never worked for anyone but the scammers, and it's now obvious to the great majority of workers that the way to increase wages, is to increase wages. This is Jim Hightower saying, percolate up economics works, trickle down does not. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So another one of those stories, I look at South Carolina, evidently one of the top Republican operatives in the state, who, all along saying, the COVID's a hoax, it's not real, it's not a big deal, he's dead. And you go, yeah, and I know it's bad for my soul to not care. I know it's bad for my soul to go, you know what? If you were dumb enough not to get vaccinated, if you're dumb enough not to protect yourself, you get what you deserve. And I know that's wrong. And I'll tell you, I've been reading some of the articles lately from doctors who have come out and said, look, I don't blame the people who are unvaccinated who are in front of me. I blame the people who are spreading the misinformation, who are filling their heads with lies and nonsense and BS. Doctors and millionaires and people who are trying to profit off of it. And I guess I'm thinking a little bit more in that way, but I'll tell you, it still doesn't make it easier on our healthcare professionals. And here to share some thoughts on what it's really like inside a hospital, what it's really like inside our medical facilities. I've asked our good friend Dr. Keith Pochick to come talk with us. Dr. Keith, thanks for taking time for us.
Greg, thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
So I'm looking at this, and I'm sure you've seen the same kind of articles that I've been seeing. Of doctors like you saying, look, I don't necessarily blame these poor people who were fed tons of misinformation and put into this position by people who are trying to profit off them or politicians who are trying to, stake out a political position. Am I wrong for going, I'm kind of leaning that way now?
No, I think that's the way to look at it, because ultimately, a leader is responsible for the way their team, their followers behave and how they act and what they do. And so I agree with you. I tend not to hold it against the anti-vaxxing folks, especially when that maybe their science is not their line of work, it's not their forte. And you just see the Fox News saturation rate in some of the areas of the country, and my area included, and you understand really what we're up against and what we've been up against now for a year and a half.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Keith. The reality is I'm not a science guy either. I'll be honest. I did not do well in high school biology. I was not great in chemistry. I wasn't good in those things. Wasn't my interest. But I do defer to people who it is their interest. It is their profession. It is what they know. I do value people of intelligence and people have spent, like you, people have spent your career and your entire life focusing on how do you take care of people. I tend to defer to people who know a little bit more than I do.
That's true. I think that what we're seeing, this is a bigger symptom, I think, or sign, that we're in the age of the death of expertise. People are just gonna believe what they want, seek out what they want to hear, and not recognize their confirmation bias and ignore the experts. We've seen that in America now, and the pandemic has highlighted that probably more than anything has in the past 20 years.
Yeah, no, but see here, I'm somebody who looks at social media and I go, I believe nothing I see on social media. Facebook, I believe absolutely nothing. Unless there is a verifiable source that I recognize as someone who's not trying to line their pockets with clickbait. And I want to believe that most people are capable of filtering bad information and going, no, and bringing in decent information and somehow having a filtration system that goes out with the bad, will hold on to what's reasonable. But I'm afraid that I'm losing that argument.
No, I agree. I think that the internet has lent a shred of credibility to everything on it. And the Washington Post and One American News look very similar when to the average reader who clicks on that, and both of those seem legitimate, and one might be fact checked and one might be willing to issue corrections and retractions and be honest about how they report, and the other doesn't. But they both, because of the internet, they both look legitimate. Yeah. And people can ultimately just hammer into Google whatever it is they want to hear, and they're going to find something to validate that.
Yeah, and that's a scary thing. And I took some heat the other day. Someone emailed me and was very angry with me for saying that Joe Rogan, when he threw the kitchen sink at his COVID, with the ivermectin and with the zinc and with I don't know what else he took. I said, look, I mean, here's a guy who's got the best medical advice that you're going to get. He's got the best doctors money can buy. He's not Bubba or Lugnut going down to the Tractor Supply buying the giant, Econo size of ivermectin and jamming it down his hole. This is somebody who's getting the best care. My concern was not about Joe Rogan, but the message of him saying, we threw the kitchen sink at it, didn't get vaccinated, but we threw the kitchen sink after it when we got it. That sent the wrong message that, we don't need the vaccine, don't care. If I get it, I'm just going to go take all of these. I'm going to take everything. And I'm going, I don't know. You're a medical professional. That a good idea?
Oh, it's awful. No, it's awful. I mean, I think that, the distrust, I think, of the medical system that has been brewing for probably 20 or 30 years or more is no more evident now. Or no more evident than it has been now. People now are they're gonna take advice from Facebook, a group of people who they have no idea what their credentials are or what their expertise is and what they actually do for a living. But they're willing to validate that individual person's held belief that that scientists are wrong and these people are smarter than the scientists and the vaccine is evil and bad and designed by Bill Gates, whatever else. I mean, you just get the list goes on and on. But the science and the truth has stayed constant. It's still the same. It's like, look at the people who are in trouble with COVID. Look at the people who are in the hospital and dying of COVID. And I mean, these are unvaccinated folks. And in my area of the country, that's hitting us, disproportionately harder than other areas of the country just because of our poor vaccination rates.
And again, it's one of these things that I believe COVID's going to be with us forever. We're not getting rid of it. It's something that we're going to have to figure out how to get past. And the quicker people get vaccinated, the better chance we're going to have to be able to survive through it. And I do believe at some point down the road, it's going to be, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, and I may be, but at some point down the road, we're going to all have to figure out how, just like the flu, every year we go get a flu shot. Every couple of years, you're going to have to get a booster. We're going to have to figure out how to live with this. I don't see any more lockdowns. I don't see the appetite to close schools down again. I think we're going to have to figure out how to power through this. And yeah, people are going to die because we're just not the society that cares about anybody else.
No, and I said this. I think I've been on with you a few times, and a year or a year and a half ago, I said what this is going to highlight is Americans' lack of patience and stamina to be able to handle a pandemic like this. That's going to challenge us really in the sense of we're going to have to run the marathon on this. It's not going to be a sprint, and that's probably one of the most accurate things, and I'm frequently wrong, but that's one of the most accurate things I've said about this is that like our patience and stamina was not there. You look at how other countries, our patience, our stamina, and our deference to experts are abysmal compared to a lot of other countries, and that's why we're in the situation we're in right now. It's
weird to me though. I know a number of people who they're contrarians. No matter what you tell them, no matter what the quote unquote experts know, no matter what the facts are, they're going to say that's a conspiracy, that it's all made up, that there's something nefarious going on. Because I do believe some people are wired in such a way that you're never going to reach them. They're always going to be anti whatever's going on, because I think it comes back down to this need for attention, this need to be special, this need to know something. Even if they don't, and even if they're wrong, but they're the loudest in the group, they're the most vocal in the group, they're the most assertive in the group, and they're never wrong because ultimately they believe.
Exactly, yeah, and so this is the curse of confirmation bias. It's like you can have 10,000 doctors who will willfully take to social media or post videos of the science behind the vaccines and tell you about how they're safe. And there'll be one other physician who will fly in the face of that, and you get this both sidesism, and all of a sudden those two opinions carry the same weight when it's 10,000 versus 1. And that's where we are in America. This both sidesism in America. It's like, no, those opinions are not equal just because you found a doctor, somewhere in Brambleweed, Idaho, who is against the vaccine. I mean, that's just not the way science works. Sure, you found the guy, and he'll get on YouTube and he'll talk about how it's a hoax and COVID's a hoax, the vaccine's a hoax, but that doesn't undo the science. That doesn't do the expert opinion of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of other scientists.
Yeah. And what's amazing, when they do come out and say that it's all bad and it's all a hoax, they always seem to have some kind of snake oil. They want to sell you that they have the real answer. And this is where when I read this latest doctor, he wrote an article in the San Francisco Chronicle a couple of days ago. And as I was reading through his article, I'm going, you look on the right wing, politically, they're always selling some kind of supplement, some beet juice or some kind of snake oil to tell you, no, this is how we're going to take care of it. Silver or magic blankets or buckets that you put your head in. I don't know what scams they continue to run, but it's always about you giving them money to buy things that questionably are not going to do anything, but possibly could hurt you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Now it's betadine. It was ivermectin. I think ivermectin is now starting to finally fall out of favor, amazingly. And now it's the iodine solution, that they use as a surgical scrub. I don't know if you've seen this. When you're prepping a patient for surgery,
that red stuff.
Yeah, the orange red.
Oh my God! People aren't drinking that, are they?
People are gargling that now.
Oh
yeah, that's the new COVID cure. Quote unquote COVID cure. Please don't do that, people. Just get the vaccine. But that's the new one. And I guess maybe the price of that will go up, and some people are hoarding it and are making money off of it. But
oh my gosh. I mean, but here's the thing. And there's part of me that goes, you know what? Take as much ivermectin as you want. And let the fun begin. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I mean, that's all I can come up with. I mean, there's a moment where you go, we got to thin the herd somehow. And if it means you're basically expelling your guts out of a small hole a small orifice in your body, maybe that's what we have to do.
Well, it's true. But then sitting where I sit, you feel so much for the healthcare teams, who are there dealing with that, as well as, there are obviously legitimate emergencies that you see. You read stories of people getting turned away from dozens of hospitals who, somebody who's having some sort of cardiac emergency, and there's no cardiac ICU in hundreds of miles, and that person dies. Or, you read of the person who had a gallstone pancreatitis, completely fixable condition, time sensitive, but completely fixable. That person is going to walk out of the hospital generally within a couple of days, and they couldn't get the guy anywhere, and he died, and he's 50 some years old. And so that's the reality that we're in right now. And a lot of folks have been talking about this for years and years, Rick, that, our hospital surge capacity is really poor. And it took a pandemic to really get America to really pay attention on that. If it's a hurricane, if it's a mass casualty shooting event, if it's a flood, that's a localized emergency. And, you can usually divert, or you can get people out away from, harm's way and into different hospitals. When you have a global pandemic that affects literally everywhere in the world and every hospital in America, that in a lot of instances, that now that doesn't exist anymore, that strategy of just getting people out of the way and in the safer areas. And that's what we're seeing. And so the surge capacity of American hospitals, the problem there that we've had now for years and years and years, that a lot of folks have been harping on, is now evident, I think, to rank and file Americans.
Yeah, but again, you go back to the beginning of this, and this is where I started, right at the beginning of this pandemic, saying we don't want to blow out our healthcare capacity. because once you fill up all the beds with people who have COVID, then you're going to be searching around. I guess he was from what, Mississippi, Alabama. They looked to 43 different hospitals in 3 states and could not find him a bed anywhere. And he ended up dying of something that was something that, 2 years ago, he'd have been okay. All because we're just not doing the right things. And, for me, there's one, I look at the fact that we got a bunch of stupid people playing stupid games, but 2, we've privatized our healthcare system to the point to where we've profitized it down to shrinking the number of beds. We've got bean counters instead of doctors running things. Our healthcare system is now a profit motive thing instead of a wellness thing. And for me, we're at a moment, I hope, and I'm hoping somebody brings this up, that we reclaim our community hospitals, that we invest in community hospitals and stop with this profitization of healthcare.
And I think that could be a silver lining that comes out of this. Maybe smaller health systems and smaller, those individual hang a shingle doctor's offices can come back because of this. That'd be great to see. I hope it happens that way. But right now, healthcare workers are struggling as a whole, and I think now what we've seen is that for years and years and years, health systems have staffed hospitals and have staffed clinics to be able to handle the lowest volume days, and then expected them to just adapt and take on the high volume days and ride it out and get through that. And now for 18 months, it's been every day has been peak flu season. And, folks are having a tough time. So if any healthcare workers or, nurses or medical assistants or rad techs or, physicians or PAs or MPs, just realize kind of what they're going through right now. And a few months ago, heroes worked here, and now we get yelled at.
No, and that's terrible. And look, I'm with our doctors and our nurses and the support staff and all the people who have to put up with this and clean up the messes and all of that. My heart is with them. I wish them the best, and I hope they're doing the good work. Folks like you, I give nothing but credit to, Keith. But I appreciate you taking some time with us, sharing your stories and your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. Yeah, anytime.
Anytime. Good stuff. Our good friend, Dr. Keith Pochick. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is it too much? Is it too much to think that people should protect themselves? I don't think so. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1970. That was the day 350,000 GM workers kicked off a 67-day strike. It was the largest auto strike since the end of World War II. According to historian Jefferson Cowie, it was likely the costliest. In his book, Stayin' Alive, Cowie notes that the strike cost GM $1 billion in profits and nearly bankrupted the union. But he adds it, quote, lacked the proletarian drama that fired journalists' hearts. For Cowie, it was an example of labor management cooperation, a civilized affair. But historian Jeremy Breacher points out that the Wall Street Journal drew different conclusions about the strike at the time. In a series of articles, the paper noted that labor management cooperation during the strike served ironically to get workers back to work. A long and costly strike served a number of functions. It wore down strikers' expectations. After 8 or 10 weeks, workers would be amiable to terms they initially rejected. It also provided an escape valve for built-up frustration over working conditions. And a long strike served to coalesce internal union factions around a common enemy, strengthening the union's leadership in the process. For management, a long and costly strike lent hope that workers would be reluctant to strike in the future. But Breacher notes these ideas about workers' motives nearly backfired. Strikers simply wouldn't budge on their demands. They made gains in wages, pensions, and cost of living allowances. And they were finally able to retire after 30 years. But critics argued the agreement fell short of initial demands, and workers lacked more say in the workplace. This would be a key issue in the many strikes and wildcats in the years to come. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
One of my favorite people on the planet right there. I got to tell you, Keith is a real salt of the earth guy and a good doctor. Somebody that I respect. And to be honest, he's been spot on all along in his advice and his view on how we deal with this. And look, as we said there a moment ago, from the beginning, this wasn't about, all of our children are going to die and everyone's going to die from it. No, we're going to have a percentage of people to die, especially grandma and grandpa. They're the most vulnerable. Our senior population, people with pre-existing conditions, people with breathing problems, they were always the ones we were looking out for. So when I hear these people going, no, we need to unmask our children, I want to see their beautiful smiles. You go, well, I guess, potentially you don't want to see grandma and grandpa anymore. Because ultimately, that's the sacrifice. Kids will get it, and kids will get through it. The vast majority. Their immune systems will get them through. The question is what happens long term? Is this something that becomes reoccurring? We don't know. There's so much we don't know. If my kid got it, does he now have a pre-existing condition that in years to come will boomerang back? I look at myself. Every year I get an upper respiratory infection. Every year. It's like clockwork. It is what it is. It's one of those things that, for as long as I can remember, I've had it. It comes, some years I get through it on my own. Some years it gets really, really bad. I got to go to the doctor. They give me an antibiotic. It clears up in a couple of days. Interestingly enough, that antibiotic keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. What used to start off as one E-myocin, I got the pronunciation wrong, and someone corrected me that it was a different drug. It's E-myocin is what it was told to me to be. I don't even know that they make that anymore. It's supposedly that week. We're now up to the Z-pack of something else I can't pronounce. But what's happened is the bug has gotten stronger. And this is the same thing with this virus. It's going to continue to mutate. It's going to continue to get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And we're going to keep fighting this battle. This is a whack-a-mole game. And this is one of those things where tolerance, understanding, compassion, decency, those are important words. Kicking and screaming like a child in the cereal aisle, not a good thing. Not helpful in any way. We're going to fly in October, and I'm dreading the occasion, because which Carl and Karen is going to throw a temper tantrum about wearing a mask, and are they going to be sitting next to me? And then do we have a problem? This is that time where we should be, as a community, going, how do we make sure each of us are taken care of, are safe, how do we respect each other? Instead of going, mine, my right. It's my right to hack and cough all over you. It's my right to spew and spittle and all that stuff. How do we get through that? Because understand, this isn't going away anytime soon. I've never believed we were going to completely eradicate it, tap it down, control it, possibly. Contact tracing, where we have outbreaks, we do some quarantining, some segregation stuff, make sure that it doesn't explode into a bigger thing. But when you've got governors like in Texas and in Florida and other places, the South, who don't seem to really care. Do you remember when Donald Trump said when it gets hot, it's going to just go away? Remember that? Remember when the heat comes, it'll go away on its own. One day we won't even know it's gone. It's just going to go. If that's the case, because it is stinking hot in the South, how come it's not going away? No, the right answer, the thoughtful answer, is because, well, in the South, it's stinking freaking hot. And everyone's going inside where the air conditioning is, where the air is recirculated, and you end up potentially being in a colder environment and confined, where all the germs will, people unmasked, spittling all over each other, will then share each other's germs. That's generally the sane, rational, thoughtful argument. But I get it's all a hoax still. I get just people with weak immune systems. Or my favorite, it's my favorite. It's the people who don't believe in Jesus, which is weird to me. Just weird to me. Look, I believe, I do, but I don't think Jesus is going to protect you from COVID. Just like he's not going to protect you if you step out on the street in front of a bus. I don't think he's swooping down to push you out of the way. That's not going to happen. You can be drenched in the blood of whatever. The bus isn't just going to go right around you. And, I'm in this spot where common decency, common respect, thoughtfulness, something we should think about. I know it's a lot to ask for. I know I'm with you. It's a lot. But I believe, I love that line. It's my favorite. I believe that we can do this. I do. I have faith. I have faith in humanity and in you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. For working people.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Forecasters say the storm could dump up to 20 inches of rain over some parts of the Gulf Coast this week.
Second monster storm in 2 weeks drowns the U.S. Gulf Coast.
When we build back, we have to build back better. It's not a Democrat thing. It's not a Republican thing. It's a weather thing.
Biden urges Congress to invest in hardening the nation's infrastructure. Plus, another nail in the coffin for the massive zombie Pebble Mine in Alaska.
All of those coffins and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We can't continue to try to ignore reality.
Oh, Mr. President, as Barack Obama used to say, yes, we can. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Tessie Doyen, yet another monster storm and yet another record hurricane season is yet again knocking out power across Texas and Louisiana.
Yes, as we go to air, Tropical Storm Nicholas is bringing days of heavy rain and dangerous flash floods to areas of Texas and storm-battered Louisiana. States of emergency are in effect. Widespread power outages are reported in Texas, again, after the ice storm earlier this year. Flights canceled and schools are closed. The National Hurricane Center warns that Nicholas is a slow-moving rainmaker that could dump as much as 20 inches of rain on some parts of the Gulf Coast.
20 inches of rain.
Yes, and that compounds storm surge with inland flooding. Inland flooding is the leading cause of storm-related deaths. Beleaguered Louisiana is still struggling to recover from a direct hit by Category 4 Hurricane Ida just 2 weeks ago. Studies show that human-caused climate change is making storms more severe, producing more rainfall, moving slower once they make landfall, and generating larger storm surges along the coast.
None of which is good news.
It's a busy week on Capitol Hill as Democrats hash out key pillars of President Biden's climate agenda in his Build Back Better proposal to create jobs, upgrading the nation's infrastructure, and shifting to clean energy.
That would be good.
It's part of the Democrats' $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation legislation that can pass with a simple majority over an expected Republican filibuster. The bill also includes funding for lead pipe removal, fees for methane leaks, transmission upgrades, and EV charging infrastructure. And under negotiation right now is a potentially game-changing policy called the Clean Electricity Performance Program, or CEPP, to incentivize utilities to accelerate the shift to clean energy. A new report from independent firm Analyst Group finds that if Congress passes the Clean Electricity Performance Program, it would create nearly 8 million new jobs and add nearly $1 trillion to the economy by 2031.
That's a good thing if we could just get that message across to Joe Manchin, who really doesn't seem to like any of this stuff.
President Biden visited the wildfire-ravaged states of California and Idaho on Monday to bolster firefighting efforts and promote his Build Back Better proposal. At the National Interagency Fire Center in Boise, Idaho, and then again in California, Biden emphasized that man-made climate change is here and the nation needs to prepare now for worse effects to come, noting that last year alone, extreme weather cost the U.S. $99 billion.
The reality is we have a global warming problem. It's not like you can build back to what it was before. It's not going to get any better than it is today. It only can get worse. For every dollar we invest in resilience, that is building back better, we save $6 down the road in the future. When we build back, we have to build back better. It's not a Democrat thing. It's not a Republican thing. It's a weather thing.
Actually, it's a climate thing, Mr. President, but we'll let you go on that one.
Some good news. The Biden Environmental Protection Agency says it will establish the first ever rules limiting the industrial dumping of toxic chemicals known as PFAS into public water systems or directly into rivers, lakes, and surface waters.
Tyrant.
PFAS are linked to a host of health impacts like cancers and birth defects. EPA will also establish new rules limiting wastewater discharges from slaughterhouses into rivers, like the Smithfield Hog Processing Plant in North Carolina, which alone dumps more than 1 million pounds of pollutants a year directly into the Cape Fear River.
Well, so much for freedom.
Finally, the Biden EPA has also put another nail in the coffin of the extremely controversial Pebble Mine, a truly massive open-pit gold and copper mine proposed in Alaska, which the EPA's studies have shown would irreversibly harm the world's largest sockeye salmon fishery in Alaska's pristine Bristol Bay watershed. The Biden EPA has asked a federal court to allow it to reopen its proposed veto of the mine under the Clean Water Act.
Well, let's hope this one sticks for a while. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So former House Speaker Denny Hastert evidently has reached an agreement to pay something, they didn't say how much, to the person who accused him of sexually abusing him as a child. There's no real news there to me for that. What was the story for me is the U.S. District Judge who evidently told Hastert there's nothing more stunning than to have the words serial child molester and Speaker of the House in the same sentence. That kind of caught my attention. But there you go. So I guess Denny's getting his life back together, and I guess okay for him. Yeah, I kind of worry about those kids, though. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Ohio congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So, yesterday's recall, kind of a blowout.
A big blowout. And people are saying that, and I think it's got to be looked at, and And there'll be people, professionals, who are going to analyze this, Rick, but a lot of people are saying, well, it's because Elder was the alternative to become the governor. And I don't think it's all Elder. I think, part of it is because they injected Larry Elder into the scene, and he's not popular. And so that's a part of it. But I think it basically, laid upon the direction that the governor was going with COVID and where the people of California wanted to be there, on the issue. Because I think it's just not sound policy to just say, well, it really wasn't the COVID, it was all Elder. I think a great portion of it was also the COVID policies, and again, where the people came down on it. But it was big for Newsom. I'm not sure that it has the sweeping broad brush now, though, that this is how it's going to be across the entire country. But I think also it's maybe a wake-up call. California does this, every gubernatorial term to somebody?
It's getting to the point where, we had a guest on yesterday who was saying it's just too easy to recall a governor.
Right.
And I don't want, I want there to be, if someone's really bad, I want there to be a path forward. But because a bunch of rich people decide we're going to throw some money into gathering some signatures and pushing forward on something like this for whatever reason, I don't know. I think it's too easy to go and undo what the ballot box has decided.
But this is the problem with recalls, in particular in California, because you hit the nail on the head. A couple of rich people can get together. Maybe one goes against a Democrat governor. Maybe one goes against a Republican governor. Who knows? But they can get unhappy, and they want to divert the attention of real issues. So, they spend a ton of money, hire people. They run out and get the signatures, and here you go.
Yeah.
And I agree. We don't have recall in Ohio. We have elections in my home state. And I've always been, I'm pleased with that. Some states have recall, some don't. I just think it makes a situation where you can get this happening every couple of years, and it just takes a lot of time away from everything.
Yeah, and you're right. And what it does, it stops everything else. So if you wanted to gum up the system even worse, this is what you end up doing. And it seems like, though, and you said, going after Republican governors or Democratic governors, it seems like they're only going after Democratic governors, because I don't remember the last time a Republican was recalled. Do you?
Well, I think, didn't they go after Schwarzenegger out there?
I thought there was talk of it, but I didn't think they actually went through a recall vote.
I know it started after Reagan, and I should know the history of this, and I don't, but I think recall motions started after that. Now, whether they got to the point of getting the signatures, they may not have.
Yeah, I now got to think about that.
We got to look at the history, exactly.
Now I know Arnold Schwarzenegger was in the movie Total Recall.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I saw that. I saw that movie.
I don't know that he was totally recalled. He wasn't recalled, but I don't know there was a vote. But I will look that up, and I hope one of our listeners sends me a message to keep us up to date on this. Do want to move along. Big bombshell yesterday came out in the book that General Milley had some conversations with the Chinese, working behind the scenes to not let Trump, nuke anything. We got a problem with that?
I've been talking about this all day long. I have read that story and other stories, but that particular story about 4 or 5 times. To me, it's one of the most chilling news accounts I've probably read in the last 10 to 15 years of anything. And I've read some pretty chilling accounts of different items. This one's so bothersome and so troublesome in so many ways of what we potentially got to the brink of. And here's the problem with this. September the 28th, he goes to, General Milley goes to, I think it's the Senate first, something. And I disagree with that. This issue is so critical, so important, so disturbing that I think that the intel agency tomorrow, Democrat and Republican, behind closed doors, and eventually, yes, results can be told, but they need to do this in a non-public dog and pony fiasco, and the Republicans say, oh, he's a traitor, he's a liar. They need to find out what has happened. Were we on the brink of a potential disaster for this country, of a potential nuclear war that would have been used to divert attention, and way beyond that would have changed our country for decades to come? And I think they need to ask the solid questions, know where the information is, then go ahead and take it public. I'm just afraid, Rick, that this becomes, before they get there, it becomes the politicization. They're after former President Trump, and the facts don't get out there. So I think they ought to do a little research, then go ahead and bring it to the light of day. But I don't see why they should wait till the 28th and then have the public hearings. Do it. Intel has every right to do it, every ability to do this.
No, I'm there with you. Now, do you agree with retired Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vidman, who said that Milley's got to resign? Quote, he usurped civilian authority, broke chain of command, and violated the sacrosanct principle of civilian control over the military. He said it's an extremely dangerous precedent, and you can't simply walk away from that. I got to tell you that, I there's that moment where when I first read this, I'm going, I get that you had to restrain Trump a little bit, and then I had to step back and go, I'm struggling with that, because if you're going to do it for Trump, you're going to do it for other people. I don't know. I'm comfortable with that.
I have a lot of questions on this story. I think it's serious. I think it's chilling in multiple ways, either chilling towards Trump or chilling with the fact that if something did happen, that the Chinese would have been called if something happened. There's a lot of questions to be answered. I'm not so sure I can agree with the military assessment that he should resign at this point in time, because there's part of the problem. I don't know.
I don't either, and that's why I'm asking you. You're someone who spent years in Congress. You're someone who's dealt with people at this high level. You know better than I do what their parameters are, what they're capable, what they're supposed to do. Because look, if you're the head of the Joint Chief of Staff, I think keeping us from nuclear war, especially needlessly, is probably somewhere in your job description. Maybe no.
Right. And I mean, the old thing, you turn the keys. If you don't turn the key at the same time, you shoot the guy and get somebody that'll turn the keys. Which, by the way, there's a lot of truth to that. How they do these things. Right. Once the codes are activated, and that's always been the set in motion thought. Well, there's other pieces to it too. And again, should he step in? I don't know. I'm torn on the story, but the problem remains and should be answered. What was the situation in the White House, and what should happen? What should the safeguards be on the other end with the military? And again, I think if we just start with, well, he had to resign, he was a traitor, or this or that, I'm not sure that's the way to approach it. They need to get down precise, extreme details on this and figure this thing out of who did what and who should have done something or not done something.
No, I got to tell you, I'm sticking with my initial reaction that he's a patriot. He's someone who saw a danger and he was saving this country from disaster, because nobody could imagine. Look, you got a guy who wanted to nuke a hurricane, and you could say, "Oh, that was a joke. He was just being funny." There's nothing funny about that. It's not something you joke about when you're the most powerful man on the planet, and there's questions of your what you're going to do with our nuclear arsenal. I don't know that I'm disagreeing with him taking some actions to provide a little buffer. I don't know.
Right, I'm in the same direction. That's why I said, nobody should call upon him to resign. That's not in the purview of these retired people. Well, he needs to resign. I don't know. But they need to vet this at the highest levels, which is the Intel Committee with the Republicans and Democrats present, and somebody from the leadership team of both parties present. They need to vet it out. They need to find out how far this thing was going to go. Look, if Trump had launched nukes on Iran or China, the bottom line is, for what reason? Answer that. For what reason would it even be considered? For what reason? There was no intel telling us that they were going to do that to us.
Right.
So, I know there's chains of commands, et cetera, but for people now to call upon him to resign, I think is just absolute premature. It's going to get that drum beating out there that he's a traitor and he's treasonous, et cetera. And I'm not sure that's the case. And that's why I think, don't do the dog and pony bit at this point in time. Get him in there. Get the necessary people that need to be in there and find out exactly, what happened. This is according to the book, but I think there's a lot of reality here.
Yeah. No, I'm
Sure.
I think it's something, and I do think it has to be public. I think we need to get a definitive answer on what happened and how it happened, and define some roles here. Just my view. I wanted to get your thoughts on North Korea. Evidently, they've got a missile train. Evidently, they've got a train that they can launch missiles from.
Well, North Korea is always, going to launch something, and we've tried every which way under the sun to deal with them. And I don't know. It's the hermit kingdom. We really don't have, I think, precise intel sometimes out of there what they're really capable of doing. And of course, it's a definite problem for that area of the world. Japan and obviously South Korea. So again, we can look at them. I think the key to containing them is China. Any pressure that the world can put upon China, I think that is the key to containing them.
Yeah, no, we got to do something most certainly on the China front as well. I wanted to get your thoughts on this story of the 3 former U.S. intelligence officers. Evidently, they paid a little fine, a little slap on the wrist, couple of bucks, over 3 years of violating U.S. hacking laws for the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. Paid a little fine, no jail time.
Yeah, I always look at this and I think of people I know, and let's see. If Rick Smith did this, what would you be eating in the main line of the federal corrections, for the next, 10 years, shall we say, plus the fine? If anybody did this, I'm looking at this and here, what do they have on the United States government as blackmail? I'm going to throw that out there. You've got 3 former U.S. intel officers. They're paying $1.7 million. Oh, big deal. How much did they make? In penalties over those 3 years, they admitted to violating the U.S. hacking and export laws while employed by where? The United Arab Emirates. And then there was a line in the story about, hackers, and we're going to go after them. Mark Lesko, the acting assistant attorney general for Justice Department, we're going to go after them. They're going to be prosecuted. No, these are like the banksters now. You do wrong, you just pay a fine. Don't worry about jail time. Anybody else in this country besides these 3 would be, eating prison food for a decade. Anybody else in this country.
Yeah, I mean, this is another one of those stories where you go, the average everyday working staff, they look at what's being presented to them, and it's no wonder they look at our government with a jaundiced eye.
Well, let me put it like this. An average person walks down the street, they go in a store, and they shoplift. And they shoplift maybe $100 worth of stuff. They'll do more time than these 3.
No, absolutely. And there was a guy in Philadelphia who took 3 peppermint patties, spent over 500 days in jail.
Right. So I find this unconscionable. I can't understand. I wish the media would dig into this. Why do they not have jail time? And why is the penalty for what they did, which was extreme against companies, and they did it on behalf of the United Arab Emirates, why are they only paying $1.7 million? I think they got somebody blackmailed.
No, they have to. If not all of the companies and our government, they got something all right.
Something.
I wanted to get your thoughts on this story of, the Republicans are looking at the southern border, looking at the Afghan refugees coming in, fleeing the Taliban. There seems to be the messaging there that the Republicans want to put forth. You think it's the wrong move? Why?
It's the wrong move because if they want to argue about the Mexican border and they want to argue about undocumented, or they call them illegals, they want to argue about that, about people coming in the country who don't have documentation. That's one issue in itself that has been and will be argued about. But right now, there's a handful of former Trump officials that are making a definite pointed effort to oppose Afghan refugees who are fleeing the Taliban. Now, the ringleader for this, of course, is Miller.
Yep.
That's the
Stephen
name
Miller.
that Stephen Miller. We need to remember Stephen Miller worked for, at that time, Congressman Shadegg when I was in the House, and he has opposed legal immigration. He did everything with Trump to stop legal immigration, including visas and visitors' visas. I mean, the guy is completely out of control. We haven't even gotten to undocumented. On this one, he's beating this drum. And these are, the Republicans have said, we've got to get the Americans out, and the Afghans helped us. And now all of a sudden, are they going to let Miller turn this into where, these people helped us, but we're not going to bring them here. Is that what they really want to do? I think this is a major mistake, and I believe that they are absolutely, if they do this, they're taking the wrong path for this. And I've got to believe most people want these refugees to be helped and to be taken care of, and people are upset that, more, in fact, haven't been, issued the visas to come here. I think it's the wrong approach, and this is all being driven. And guess what? Stephen Miller's going to make some money off this, okay? Some think tank, some lobbyist, somebody's going to pay him.
They always do.
Somebody.
It's amazing how they always do. Last thing I wanted to ask you about, we're about ready to bump up against the debt ceiling, and this is one of those things that we talk about it every time it gets here. Is there anything the Republicans can do to stop Democrats from raising the debt ceiling?
Not really. I mean, look, when Trump was the smartest on this. I've got to give it to Trump on this one. He just did away with it for 2 years.
Right.
The media didn't say anything. He just they did it. Let's just kind of put it on ice for 2 years, literally. When Bush was president, people would say something, give some floor speeches. They would put their voting machine in the card. I called it the yawn vote. They yawned and went to dinner. When Barack Obama became president, this was the end of the world. Every one of these was the end of the world.
Yep.
The debt ceiling, that is money that is spent, and then you raise the debt ceiling. If they want to, be fiscally sound, then take care of the budgets before it gets to the debt ceiling vote. And so this will make it. They'll kick the can down the road. They're not going to stop the government dead in its tracks. So it will make it, but they'll build this into a end of the world case. It's been going on forever about raising the debt ceiling because they've already voted to spend the money.
So there's no Armageddon coming. There's no end of the fiscal world on the horizon.
No.
Going to be okay. And I got to be honest, at some point, Biden got us out of Afghanistan, ended that, pulled the Band-Aid right off. Good. Can we just pull the Band-Aid off and get rid of this debt ceiling? Because clearly we're not going to stop spending money, and the debt ceiling does nothing but cause crisis. Again, we should be arguing at the beginning, like you said, before you spend the money.
Sure. Before we spend it. And the media loves to build this, we're to the edge, and they make it all dramatic, and then they step in, and we all know they're going to do it. It's going to be extended. But again, how can you say this is the fiscal way to solve the problem? No. The fiscal way, if they want to be responsible in their own minds or their own images, then do it before it gets to the debt ceiling level. That's where you argue it, not now.
Not right there. I'm right there with you. And how we pay our bills is we tax the rich and use that money to pay off our bills. But, Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. And look, here's the reality. If you're really hell-bent on you care about the debt and the deficit, as Joe Manchin now claims he does, if that's the reality, you now care, how about paying the bill? And we do that by going after the very wealthy who have shirked their responsibility for decades. We now know the Treasury Department came out with a report, said, look, there's $600 billion a year on the table that the very wealthy and well-to-do have stuffed into their pockets, and their offshore tax havens and under the mattress or wherever they store it, that they didn't pay taxes on. They've got armies of tax avoidance lawyers out there trying to use every loophole available, even ones that they're not entitled to just squeeze our government a little bit more. So we can't do things. We can't pay our bills. And what the argument then comes down to, no, see, Rick, what we got to do is what we do at the kitchen table. Tighten the belt. Tighten the belt. Tighten the belt. Stop the spending. Stop spending on education and health care, and stop spending on programs to help the poor and the needy. Stop spending on feeding children school lunches, because it'll just make them dependent. It's a slippery slope, right? Once they get used to eating, well, they're not going to want to give it up. So don't feed them, and they'll get used to being hungry, and they'll be hungry, and they'll work harder, pull themselves up by proverbial bootstraps that they don't have. That's the narrative, right? It's a nonsense narrative, but it's one that some buy. And it never seems out of range when the Republicans go, no, we need to give corporations more. We need to give the wealthy more. They need it. Those children living in the car with their parents, no. That homeless veteran, no, we can't possibly, no. But another tax break for corporate America, we've always got time for that. Another handout, another welfare payment to Jeff Bezos, we always got time for that. We've always got money for that because they're the job creators. They're the innovators. And if we don't give them the money, they won't create the jobs, which is just nuts. Because, I say a lot of times, capitalism will solve our problems. The moneyed interests, people chasing the dollars, will figure it out. COVID, capitalism will figure COVID out. And the people who have been touting capitalism for a very long time, going to be interesting watching them turn into socialists. Just my thought. But lots of stuff to get to and lots of fun on the horizon. And this is just part of it. For me, you want to talk about our debt ceiling? Let's talk about paying the bill. I pay my bills every month. And when I don't have enough money, I work a little bit more. I bring in some more revenue. It's what we need to do. Bring in a little bit more revenue. We need to make sure we can pay our bills so we can support our society. Just my thought. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you follow us on Twitter @RickSmithShow. Facebook, give us a like while you're there. Check out our YouTube page. Subscribe. Give us a thumbs up as well. All good stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Again, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.